And there we go. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Fairleigh Dickinson University's Rothman Institute of Innovation and Entrepreneurship's Zoom at noon. You will find us here in the Coaches Corner, or our Coaching Corner, the second Friday of the month. I am thrilled to be pitch hitting for Dr. Dale Caldwell. We have some guests today. I'll introduce myself, and then I would love my panelists to introduce themselves. Today in the Coaching Corner, we are talking about the art of the question. So my name is Jo Colontonio, and I'm the lead instructor for the Executive Leadership Coach Certification Program that is offered through our institute. I am also the CEO of Ignite Business Partners, where we work with individuals, leaders, teams, and organizations to develop and grow their most important asset, which is often not on their balance sheet, right, Tony? Their people, right? Because their people or their human capital is really their most important asset. Without that, we could not, the company would not be able to successfully execute any strategy. So we work with people strategy, and so do my guests today. So that being said, I'm just going to go sort of clockwise for me. So Tony, you're up in my right. Please introduce yourself. Tell us what you do and where you're from and whatever other goodies you want to give us.
Good. Thanks, Jo. Thanks for inviting me. So my name is Tony Novak. I'm a CPA. I'm in solo practice. I'm told that we're like a dying breed, like dinosaurs now. But I work out of South Jersey, and with the evolution of remote services, I'm able to serve clients anywhere. And I have decades of advisory experience, and we've talked extensively about advisory versus coaching. And, you know, the world has changed. Advisory just doesn't work like it used to. And coaching, Jo says I'm a walking commercial. Coaching has been transformative to my client conversations.
Thank you, Tony. Next up, I have Dr. Candice Racite.
Hi, everyone. I'm Candice. I am the Dean of Internship and Career Planning for Rowan College, South Jersey. And I'm in a unique position because, having just completed the Fairleigh Dickinson Executive Coach Training with Jo, I'm able to help my students in a very different way. So I'm always looking to get them internships and get them jobs and be forward thinking. But with the coach training now, I'm able to actually figure out who they are, ask them the right questions that puts them in a completely different mindset. So I'm happy to be here today and share what I can with you.
Thank you. And that leaves us with Mr. John Griffith.
Good afternoon, everybody. Nice to be with you. A little bit of background. I've been doing leadership development work, mostly in large corporations, some in nonprofits, for about 22-ish years. And that
you started so young.
Yeah. Would that were the case. So that initially it was largely training. And my visceral orientation was coach. So the training morphed into a coaching style, and then had coaching components with most of my training. And then I started doing executive coaching, meaning longer term engagements, working with one person or a team in order to help them grow. And what I love about the whole doggone thing is that I love seeing people give greater evidence to the gifts they walk around with every day, and being able to use those in their work and in their lives and experience a lot of satisfaction that way. So as a coach, my orientation is to try to help them remove whatever underbrush keeps those gifts from being expressed in the most powerful way. And so I coached for a number of years before I came into Jo's program, and I got some really valuable additions to what I did, and some correctives to what I'd done for years in my coaching work. So we'll be talking about some of that when we talk about empowering questions. And so I look forward to exploring that a little bit more.
Thank you, John. I just also want to just touch base to see if Dr. Dale Caldwell is with us. We know that he's on the road today, but Dale, are you available? Okay.
He's not on, Joe.
That's quite all right. I just wanted to give him an opportunity. After all, he is the one that was really responsible for bringing the coaching modality to FDU when he reached out to me and we began to collaborate our partnership. So thank you everyone for being here. Just a quick note. We're going to be changing the format for the coaching corner that will occur the second Friday of each month. We're going to choose the format to a meeting format. That way we can bring everyone into the room instead of panelists and have a little bit, as coaches, we love to have the conversation. All my coaches are shaking their head, right? We love that. It is the art and science of the conversation, right? So, so just know that your link will be a little bit different next month. So today's topic, when I say the art of the question, what actually it's truly, John, you corrected me, the art of empowering questions, right? Feels like a sleight of hand, but it really isn't.
No.
The word empowering is in there for a reason. So do you want to speak to that, John, since you brought up that differentiation, which I'm happy to hear you saying.
Sure. Yeah, no, I'd love to, because I was thinking about why do we say empowering? And so I thought about when we use the word empowering, we're often thinking in terms of a manager, for instance, empowering an employee. And what does that look like? Well, sometimes it's, I'm going to give, let's say Tony was an employee of mine, and I've tended to give him a lot of direction. And then I had the brilliant idea one day that maybe Tony could figure some things out on his own. And so I go, okay, I'm going to give you less direction, and I'm going to give you more latitude for using your own creativity and your personal initiative and your vision and your understanding of the work that you do to come up with a plan, a solution, a set of activities, and maybe even give you, just say, here's the result, you figure out how to do it. Whatever that is. So in a hierarchical situation, I've said, I'm going to take some of my control away. I'm going to give more control to you, Tony, because I believe you can do this. And so I think that's where the power is transferred. I'm taking away my controls and my exercise of control and activity and my analytical thinking and my creativity, and saying, you take all of those things and you make the most of them. So that's a way you can empower. So how does a coach empower? Well, there's a distinction there. A coach really should be treating the client as a peer. It's not an authoritarian, it's not an authority figure over the client.
We say, John, that we hold the client in absolute, the highest positive regard.
Exactly. And so,
right.
So how do I empower? In what position am I that I might be able to empower the client? And it's really the power of helping them investigate their own abilities, their own command of their work, their own understanding of the culture within which they're trying to succeed, differently from the way they might on their own. And that gives them the power of further insight into what they already have access to and what they already know. Because we can't know the job the way they know the job.
Right.
And so that was, I knew that before I came into the program, and I executed on it some, but I also tended to bleed in more of, well, if I understand your business well enough, then I can have insights that will help you, which is a little more like the consulting stuff. And a part of that, there's a power issue there too. A part of that is me demonstrating my value through my insight into your business and helping you navigate that business better. Well, that's more consulting, and that's me demonstrating my value through my insight into your world. Coaching and the great practice I got, which was the important part, was practicing it in the program, in your program, Joe, was no matter what I understand about their business or their work or anything like that, they're going to get better insight that's going to be more meaningful to them and be inculcated much more quickly into their system of thinking and their activities if I help them use my expertise to help them look more into their world themselves, and the light bulb goes on inside of them. They're going to get the warmth from the light bulb and the new idea, and that's going to be replicable, much more replicable for them much more quickly than if I say, by the way, your environment does this and looks like that, and point to it.
That's part of, that blends in some of our foundation principles where we consider that where we know that we're going to meet the client where they are, right? We also talk a lot about in coaching that the client is really the expert in their business, in their life, in their industry. And I like to say that, you know, I'm there or we're there to facilitate their greatness, right? And to get them from where they are to where they want to be. And as coaches, we're really that bridge. And that bridge, among other things, because we are going to have more of these, coaching is not just all about questions. It just so happens that last month we did emotional intelligence, and this week we're doing the art of the question. And there are a lot more school skills and tools along the way that we're going to look at. So quality questions really get quality answers, but empowering questions get sustainable action, right? With an internal buy-in. So in doing that, we're able to connect the client's inside passion, purpose, want, desire, choice, whatever we want to say, to their external goals and strategies, and support them to create a pathway. And a lot of time when we are using these empowering questions, there's an art and also in science there, because we are using neuroscience and the neuroplasticity, right, that we all have in our brains and in the way that we think. So does someone want to jump in and speak about the art of asking questions to create a new neural pathway, right, from having them look at something from a different perspective?
May I?
Absolutely, Tony.
So the very phrase empowering question or the art of empowering questions sounds like we as coaches need to be freaking superstars and coming up with the perfect question. And you know, we're not. And so I just wanted to share what I've learned in that, using that. It's been a huge power tool to me. Now, in the course, we talked about, you know, reverting to 5-year-old questions. You ask a 5-year-old question and they say, why? You tell them the answer and they say, why? Then they say, why? So it doesn't need to be more complicated than that. And in my case, I'll use a real example, is that going back more years than I want to really count, I learned in law school from probably my most influential professor. He taught the art of questioning in a planning, in a tax and estate planning course. And it drove us law students think we're, sharp, we're not, but we think we are. Anyway, he would just keep asking the butts have stimulations, and he would just keep asking why, or what else, or just real simple questions. And it drove us crazy because we were going for sometimes 20 minutes and we'd have a sample case, say a person with a complicated financial problem, and there's business people and their spouses and ex-spouses and shareholders and this, and he would just keep saying, why? What do you want? What are you trying to accomplish? Why? What else? And it drove us nuts. But my point here is that seldom, almost never, when you ask a question, no matter how brilliant it is or how stupid it is, do you get the right answer the first time. You have to keep probing, and the probes do not have to be complicated. And so, like, for example, one thing for me is people say, I got this terrible tax problem, or I can't pay these taxes. Well, why? What else? What's money? And you find out that there's pressure from a spouse, or there's misperceptions, or they've received wrong information, and that never comes out in a first question. So that's my 2 bits.
Yeah. And Tony, with your industry, because when you came to the course initially, you were really looking at your communication style, right? And how to improve that in a way to build relationship and connect with your clients. And I remember you early on asking those brilliant long questions, right?
Compound questions.
Yes. And that's right. When we sort of look back at that neuroscience piece, that can be confusing, right? And that's why, to a certain extent, we do want to keep it simple, keep it clear, but at the same time, be able to be embraced and the client be able to move forward. So when we ask, so just to finish up, there's a question. I know I don't want to put you on the spot, Candice, but when you use a reframing tool in a coaching conversation, you are really changing neuroplasticity, right? Do you want to expand on that?
Sure.
And what that means to the group who are listening?
Yeah. So,
and yes, I asked a yes or no question. I should have said what, everyone? Would you please? But I'm interviewing, I'm not coaching.
So when you're talking to somebody as a coach, or, for those of you that are listening and you think about your day-to-day, whatever position that you hold, however many people report to you, you're living your life being the person that you are. And you have your own natural habits, your own set of fears, your own set of expectations. You have plans for every day, short-term, daily, long-term. And part of what the coaching process does is its intention is to disrupt that cycle. And that's kind of what the neuroplasticity is. When we start meeting with teams or individuals and get to know them a little better, and you have some basic questions and you've spent a couple weeks over a couple hours kind of getting to know them, we can start to hear things that you repeatedly say. You keep sharing the same types of situations, and that you keep answering them with the same tool set. And so when we hear that, we look for a way to reframe, right? Because you're still showing up at the same place, still working with the same people. You still have the same, maybe general outcomes, which is profit, or employee motivation, or whatever it might be. So we're looking at, like, what if you considered it this way? And we ask that question. So now you're in a mindset to say, oh, I do the same thing every day, or this is always my attitude, or always my outlook, or always most people, I feel, this is my opinion, usually ask the question and have the answer they hope to get or hope to hear. And we're trying to coach people that are in leadership out of doing that sometimes, right? You want to go in and ask a question or make a plan to work with your people and be in that environment where you're able to start asking them the reframe of questions, or not expect the same answer. And we want to make you comfortable with doing that by putting you through that process to see how you might be able to evolve and change and make your outcomes daily, short-term and long-term, a little bit different. And that neuroplasticity is starting to change those habits. So you're aware, I always do this, I'm going to try it different today, and become more comfortable with just being curious. And that'll set you up for your next question, Joe. Just being curious.
Another educator setting me up.
Just being curious about how else it could go today, what you could do different to kind of test and see. And that's where innovation will thrive. That's where change and growth happens. And when you're just willing to reframe and take a different perspective. And that's what we're really here to do, is help you see where that opportunity lies and where you can go with it.
Yeah, we're supporting for opportunity and possibility, right? And to shift mindset, to be able to explore that. And when we're doing that, through using and through the art of empowering questions, we are actually activating different areas of the brain, or having the person think from a different area of their brain than they normally do. Your answer prompted me to just grab a few numbers, just a little bit of data, which I think will help our listeners with that whole automatic thought piece and how we're using tools to sort of maybe reframe that or look at that from a different direction. So we have an average of 60,000 thoughts a day, every person. 95% of them are the same thoughts.
They're repetitive, yeah.
That repeat every day. And so if that's not bad enough, 80% of those habitual thoughts are negative.
Mhm.
So that's that. I have a thought, I go to this thought. I have a thought, I go to this thought. I have a thought, I go to this thought. Through coaching, we're kind of moving them over to look at it from a different perspective. Because if we can change our thoughts, we can actually learn and look at things in a new and positive way. So that's really something to think about. So
Joe, that's when I mentioned helping clients remove the underbrush.
yes.
That's a big part of it, because one of the things one can wonder as a coach, if I'm not telling people brilliant insights, where is my value? And because we've grown up in our education system demonstrating having the answer is where our value is, right?
Yes.
And we have deep neural pathways
To get there.
that say that tell us that is the way to demonstrate our value, is to have the answer. And in early career, it still often is.
Mhm.
Where that starts to lose its value is when one has to manage other people. And you really need to get the best out of the other people. And you having the answers all the time actually has the opposite effect. It
Yep.
doesn't get the best out of them.
And those leaders don't get the most respect because they're not engaging their teams.
So all of that deep, that's right. All that deep neural training, though, then comes in when one wants to be a coach. And you go, well, if I give really brilliant answers, they're going to think I'm good. They're going to want me to coach them more. But what is our art? What are we bringing? Where's our value? It's helping them if we're outside observers and we ask good questions, we can help them see their underbrush.
Absolutely.
And see that they have repeated patterns.
Yeah.
And that information is something they can use to transform themselves. We're just helping them become aware of it most of the time. And then we've had this discussion a bunch of times about, do you sometimes just tell somebody something even as a coach? Well, there are situations where it's helpful for you to say, 2 steps ahead of you can look like this, from your own experience with other clients and your own growth and all of that. So it gives them something to aspire to. It can also give them the belief that this whole thing can work.
Yeah, because
So
you're actually using a combination in using, so that technique, that statement that you made has like 4 coaching tools in it. Right?
Okay.
Right, we know we're stretching, we're planting the seed, right? We have all these other, so exactly. And in our defense, everyone, know that we listen at approximately 125 to 250 words a minute. That's the rate that we listen, but we think at 1,000 words a minute. So think about that. We're only using 25% of our mental capacity to even get the gist of what someone's saying because our mind is so busy. And as coaches, we're working on quieting that mind, right? So that we can begin to stretch and grow and shift the client and work with them to move towards change and embrace change in a safer way. And sometimes that change starts just with thoughts.
Yes.
So Candice did a great job with setting me up for curiosity, right? And would somebody jump in and just sort of share why we use curiosity in our empowering questions. Because if we're curious, we can be nothing else, right?
Well, the brain, that's one of the best ways to get out of a fight or flight response is to, if you can ask yourself a question, be curious about what your experience is and how you're experiencing it.
Yeah.
You can pull processing power out of the stress response and into higher order neocortical thinking.
Yeah.
So you're actually you're switching off the stress response, and then you can actually observe your own from that higher level thinking. You can even observe your own behavior and your own thoughts.
Yeah.
And
oops, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Go
finish.
ahead.
Go ahead. Finish your thought. I
was just thinking about that when we can observe it ourselves, that data is relatively incontrovertible to us.
Yeah.
Right? So if the coach says, here's what you're doing, A, B, C, D, okay, they may or may not really.
It's like your mother's telling you, right? Like, yeah.
Right, exactly. The nag is no. But if you observe yourself doing the thing the coaches ask you to pay attention to, then you pretty much buy it.
Tony, I was going to jump to you because I know that this tool really was a game changer for you with being so in a business and an industry that's so numbers focused, so precise, so particular. So sitting as an expert always and people coming to you for advice, how adding curiosity to the empowering questions just sort of opens up a floodgate of information when working with your clients. Very different, you've shared with me, than before.
Yeah,
Would you speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. So let's start off by saying, curiosity is almost universally viewed as a positive trait, a positive characteristic to bring to a conversation or relationship. So that is a great tool to use with coaching. And if I may, George has posted a question in the Q&A, and I'm going to tie it in with that. So,
great, thank you.
Sometimes, particularly when talking to someone that is historically or reputationally known as an advisor, people, they just want to know the answer. Just tell me what it is, and let's move on. And here I am, asking nice questions and trying to get to know you. And it's George said, darn, the client says, just tell me the answer already. So I'm going to respond to that from a business point of view and what's working for me. So,
well, Tony, first of all, he said, let's look at the first part. Let's coach him a little bit. How do you respond or react? What should he be doing? First of all, what should his mindset be? Responding or reacting? Responding, right?
Yeah.
As coaches, when we're in that coaching mindset and we're sitting in our integrity, we only respond.
Yeah, I didn't even pick that up.
Which takes the energy, takes the energy out of it and automatically reduces the tension in the situation. Right. So didn't mean to interrupt you, but I saw that in writing, and all of a sudden I said, oh, tool right there, reacting versus responding.
Yeah, that I know that jumped out and bugged you right away. I didn't even catch that, but that's
and I believe that Jorge has is in a similar industry than you are. I met him the other day in an open house. So so any insights would be great for him.
So Jorge, here's what's working for me. So your question as posed, we can sort of presume that this situation would come up before you've had an opportunity to reach a coaching agreement. The coaching agreement would include a discussion about what coaching is and what coaching isn't. And it comes up. So this question would come up before that. And yes, Jorge, it is, it's a real thing. It really does come up. People do get frustrated. I receive calls, for example, from I'm thinking of one that came in for a nonprofit that needs an audit. And what they want to do is it's the executive director calling. She wants a number. What's it going to cost me for an audit? I have no idea. I want to ask. I want to get to know them. I want to get a feel for whether it's somebody I can even work with before we even get into data. So that kind of frustration can come up, and it did come up in that conversation. So my point is that I use to address that is prior to our reaching an agreement, and a business agreement, whether it's a coaching agreement, accounting agreement, otherwise, yeah, this conversation is not advisory. This is just to get to know us. So I for example, on my business offers free
It's part of that.
consultation, but it's not an advisory consultation. It is a get to know you and find out about, what makes me tick, what makes you tick before we even get to that. And I just say, when we get to a coaching conversation and agreement, we'll discuss all of that. But yeah, that's I guess that's a long way of answering, I think, Joe, what you were asking.
Yeah, well, I also think that, so today our discussion is the art of empowering questions. There's a lot to do before you even begin that. And what you're speaking about, what Tony is speaking about is creating the alliance, which is a part of the process, which we do very early in the coaching relationship. And during that alliance, you're creating how you'll be working together, right? What the expectations are, what coaching is, what coaching isn't. In Tony's case, he may outline, these are my coaching services, these are my consulting services, these are my accounting services, 3 completely different areas. He does wear multiple hats, but when that hat is on that he's wearing, that's the mode that he's in. So I think what you shared, Tony, was that you really, through bringing coaching in, you've gotten to know your clients better. They've become, more committed to you. You've been able to help them more, right? Because you sort of know the real reason, or you understand like why that person in particular wanted to use that money, which gives you insights to other areas of where you could help and bring in more information.
So yeah, and just to recap that, so the difference between advisory and coaching are significant, but generally a coaching approach is going to be welcome, except when the other person has an advisory expectation right off the bat. And most likely that's going to be an issue in your initial conversation before you've even really had a chance to get into much discussion. So while I'm acknowledging it is a real issue, it's only a real issue in the very initial conversation.
Awesome. So
Yeah.
I saw a question that was in there, and Candice, I think you were answering and then it popped. So the question was from GF Harris. When I ask a question and seek an answer, the
That
time,
wasn't the first question.
okay, where am I? Okay.
The first question was, there's concern with the time, not how the clock works. So I asked for clarity about the time, and the response
Okay.
to that, GF Harris said, when I ask a question, I seek an answer, the time, not BS or fluff. I work in a private practice healthcare setting and have little patience for the BS. So I'm asking if joining today was hoping to find out how to ask people questions so they give you the right and honest answer and not avoid.
Oh,
And
that's
so
great.
I think what we're saying as
Yeah.
coaches is, in a coaching situation, it does take time to get to know people, to know what makes them tick, to know, when they are looking up and to the left, when they're raising their eyebrows. We pay attention to everything so that we can identify whether, they're delaying, whether they might not be totally truthful, whether they're telling us the truth. We can gauge all those things. If you're in a healthcare setting and you only have, your 25 minutes with your patient in that practice, it's probably going to be difficult to get a spot on answer right away. I don't know if these are people that you see repetitively or, what type of healthcare it is, but we do have, a good list of questions depending on who you're talking to and what about, that would probably help you, at least give you a gauge or a new set of questions, a new way to maybe reframe some of your questions, and that might help you.
The other thing is just to add to that, Candice, to say to GF Harris, while we're creating a safe space, sitting in integrity, and we've established trust, and we're building these conversations, we are also laser focused. So we are laser focused on what the client is doing, what the client is, how they're moving, how they're breathing, their tone, what they're saying, and what they're not saying. And there are times, as we all know, guests, that a client will avoid answering the question. They may try to deflect. And there are absolutely techniques to get that client back on track and resolve that issue. So, and I'd be happy to speak to GF about that, offline, or I think any of you would be happy to speak about that. But did that help, GF, a little bit to give you an idea? We're giving you like a small snippet of a fully built technique.
Joe, can I jump in there?
Absolutely.
For GF. So what I hear is at least 3 of us, maybe all 4 of us, are saying that very often, and perhaps most of the time, you don't get the valuable information real fast in that 10-minute or 20-minute time slot. It's often the reality is it takes longer than that. And I feel blessed that my doctor asks me again and again and lets me change my mind or modify my answer, but that's not always possible. I just want to add that there is at least some body of information out there that suggests that getting to the real answer can be a learned experience. And I'm going to just mention the book Click. There's a book Click that I read a long time ago, and it basically talks about the ability to get there quickly, to really make a connection very quickly. I'm not saying that that it's always there. I'm not saying that I've ever mastered it, but there certainly is a skill there.
I
Thank
think
you,
also,
Tony.
as we talk about it, sometimes it takes a long time, and sometimes it's extremely efficient. Because when we ask more questions rather than talking to the client, they'll often lead us to where the water really is, much more quickly than us guessing and coming with our own assumptions about the first thing they tell us. And if we follow that trail, we can, as Joe said, we're focused on their entire demeanor, and that gives us clues about what has real meaning to them. So they may say one thing, and we may be able to notice another in their behavior, in their posture, all kinds of things, and that informs us our follow-up questions. So it's an iterative process where they're leading us in a certain way, but it's through our observation we help leading them with good questions. And sometimes they will get down to the ground truth, their ground truth, much more quickly through that process than a more consultative process where the consultant thinks, okay, I've heard a little bit, now I know where we're going, I know what goes on here and how it operates, so this is the advice I'm going to give you, or this is the next step I'm going to offer. It can be really quick, and it's very dependent on the relationship with the client and the nature of the subject, the topic, the nature of the topic. But I also wanted to give an example, if I could, about where coaching sometimes you have to give actual just information, kind of like telling what time it is, to a client in a way that really helps them. I had a client who, among one of the times we met, he told me about this interaction with another executive and how bellicose that executive was and how superior he seemed to come across and all that stuff. And it really rankled the heck out of my client. So he was gassing on about it and among the things I sometimes will ask is, so what's important about that to you? Why does that, what's it, why does that matter? Or if that happens, what difference will it make to you? But anyway, I go through the whole process with him and I said, so to what would you attribute that behavior? He did his best. We go through a few of those and eventually I realized we'd hit the end of his emotional intelligence. He couldn't imagine, there were possibilities that he could not imagine about why that person might be treating him that way.
Mm-hmm.
I said, honestly, I said to my client, honestly, Ken, I think he's afraid of you. He's intimidated by you. And he just flew back in his chair. How could that, really? How could that be? He did this, he did that. And I said, well, just imagine. And we went through some possibilities, and it totally changed his mindset, my client's mindset about it. And so the next time he interacted with the guy, he took a very different path. And in our next meeting, he said, it was totally different. It was amazing. Because once he realized that he was intimidated, the guy was intimidated by him and was fighting for status.
Yeah.
Trying to protect his status. He at first, all that did was when the first time it happened, it caused my client to be defensive. So all that did was raise the temperature. And once he tried a different approach, it disarmed the guy, and they related much better. So what that did, I gave him information out of my experience and background, right? So that's when we said we don't do that. We ask questions. Well, sometimes we do that. And what happened then with my client was it helped us be clear on a need he had, which was to raise his emotional intelligence significantly. That was a gap. And that brought the gap forward. And then we could really get clear on the goal of helping him achieve that.
Yeah. It's an ongoing process. And the other thing is just a reminder for the people that are not in the industry. Today, we're speaking about the art of empowering questions, but asking questions is not all that coaches do. It is a complete conversation with both people participating and playing full out. There are skills in listening. There are other tools that we're using at the same time. So I just want to make sure everyone understands that, because how often do we hear, oh, well, yeah, I'm a coach, I just ask a lot of questions. It may not be a quality question. It may not be a forwarding question. It may not be a solutions focused question, right? So Candice, thank you for answering Jorge's question. Do you want to read it out loud and then just share your answer? And can you throw in a little bit of why we use why sparingly? I'm gonna let you shine on that and not say it myself. Go ahead.
Sure. Jorge asked, besides why, what follow-up questions do you ask to receive the real and deeper answer or challenge the perception, or as it was said, the BS? And I wrote,
and we definitely challenge, right? As coaches, we definitely challenge, and we challenge at different levels of energy, depending where the client is and what we discussed when we created our coaching alliance as to how they wanted to be coached. I have one client who said, Joe, I don't care if I'm on a respirator, unconscious, I want you to hold me accountable, right? Very different than someone who's said, I'm in a lot of pain. Please work with me gently. Yeah. So Candice, go ahead. I'm going to turn it back over to you.
Sure. So I responded that, I might ask someone, what's the first time? Tell me about it, what it was like the first time you felt that way, right? So this is going to lead them to share some background, talk about the emotions they felt the first time. Because often when you're meeting with people, it could be years after a situation. And people have, you develop how you do, you grow up, you have experiences, and then you're at a point in time when you need a coach, or you're in a situation where you have to figure out how to ask questions. So I usually take them back to the beginning, because that helps me understand a little bit more about it. And then a lot of times when people are talking about what they think or how they feel, we can ask a scaling question, like on a scale of 1 to 10, how sure are you that, you're really at an 8 in this situation?
My favorite tool.
And then when they start delving into, okay, well, an 8, now they have a picture, they understand scales. Do they want to really commit to that level of accountability at an 8? Or is it really like, I'm just mad right now, but on the grand scheme of all things I'm dealing with, it might be at a 4, and so then you just start to figure the person out when they're emotionally responding and what they start saying. Are they full of adjectives, and you're trying to just get clarity around a lot of things. And so we use a lot of clarifying questions and scaling questions to get to that deeper meaning, to figure out what really brought them here, what makes them tick, the direction they're trying to go. So I hope that helps to answer your question.
The other thing, just to follow up with that, and so Tony and John have experienced this, and Candice, I don't know if you have recently, but 99% of the time, 99.999. Do I have to add? Tell me if you think I need to add another 9. But 99.9999999% of the time, the challenge that the client says they're having, or the problem that they come to you with, is never the real problem, right? It's never the actual issue. So that's why we, as coaches, we have all of these tools and techniques. And sometimes people don't realize that they aren't bringing the real issue forward. Other times they're afraid to bring that real issue forward, and they need the coach to create that safe space for them, right? So an example of this would be that, let's see, this is, I think, an example that sometimes I use that.
And can I give you a real one?
Yeah, go ahead. When the issue, give us a real one.
So
no names, you know that.
No names, and not at my current job. I was young, working. I had a pretty good job. It was fine, but I was not getting along with my boss. Who's ever had that problem, right? And so, we're constantly back and forth. Things aren't making sense. It's all this communication that's missing all these things. And I'm blaming. And through a period of time, a set of questions, talking to some people, I was able to realize that it's my own dissatisfaction with the limitation that I put on myself, because I wasn't going after and taking any risks to get a bigger and better job. I was sitting semi-content in this secure position, making X amount of dollars. I wasn't using my degree. I wasn't using my skills, but I was afraid. I was afraid to drive to Philly. I didn't want to pay to park. I didn't want to deal with the elevators and the traffic. And that whole dissatisfaction that I was dealing with myself is what was creating my attitude with the people that I was working with. And it was all me. And, I can say that now because I'm much older in a different position. It's all good. Yeah. But that's not what I thought the problem was. I was in a blaming situation, looking at the day-to-day of everything. And it wasn't, it was me. And so that's what she means. Whatever you think your issue is, it's probably true. Those things are really happening. But why you can't overcome, figure it out, deal with it, move beyond, is because something inside of you has some kind of block, or you haven't identified, what the real driving force is.
Or you just don't know to think about it from a different perspective, because you're stuck where you're stuck, and you're stuck in that thought pattern, and it's become habitual, and it's one of your 60,000 thoughts that you have a day, and the 80% that are negative. Another example would be, I had a client who was a sole practitioner in a law firm, and the organization grew and grew and grew. And and the whole time, I'm going to use the word secretary because back in the day, that was the role. I don't believe that we use that term anymore. I'm not sure if we do, but this woman was his right-hand person. And she did everything. She did, the phones, the reception, the bookkeeping, the marketing, whatever was needed. And as his organization grew and grew and expanded, he was bringing on people to do those individual roles. And her work area began to be very messy, very sloppy. She started coming into work late. She wasn't executing projects on time. And so he brought us in to figure out what was wrong. He thought she was going to leave, and she was maybe going on interviews. He made up a story as to what was happening. And after working with her, what we discovered was that she was his right-hand person and did everything, and she was feeling undervalued and underused. But in reality, he was growing and bringing on other people and wanted her to be part of that, but that it wasn't being received that way. So in actuality, it wasn't because she was sloppy and disorganized and late or something was going on or she was going to leave. It wasn't the issue that he thought it was. So that's another example of, a misinterpretation or an assumption that may happen. And maybe she didn't really know.
And you don't uncover that without good questions. Until
we really had that conversation. The other thing that I wanted to mention about why questions, because in this area, when we delve deeper, as coaches love to do, we have our empowering questions, and then we have the wording and the semantics and the way that we ask the questions, whether they're open-ended, close-ended, and I don't want to get into the weeds, leading, yes or no. There are lots of questions that we use or don't use for particular reasons, and we spend hours and hours and hours of that in class, right? You guys love the feedback when I say nope, yes or no question, right? To retrain your thought pattern. But with Jorge said with why questions can be misinterpreted. So it's something that we use sparingly
as a challenge.
Yeah,
it can be seen as a challenge.
Yes. So
as opposed to what's important about that.
Yeah. So we're trying to gain insight as a coach, but the client can receive it and be defensive. So think about why is that different versus what makes that different?
Yeah.
So there are nuances. Just know that the coaching conversation, although it is spontaneous and flexible, it is very deliberate, right? Just thinking of a why or a what. Another one that we look at sometimes is how, okay? How can infer maybe the person's not sure of something. I really like how questions, but it's safer sometimes with someone that you don't know to say, what are the steps? Right? Just a different technique. Go ahead, Tony.
Yeah, can I jump in to follow that? So
absolutely.
So all of us are listening. I hope you can pick up. John has amazing ability to ask insightful questions. And I've had enough experience working with John. He has that skill. He just is able to put together the words, under pressure, on the fly, in a live situation. Joe has her favorite questions. And if you'll learn listening to her that she has them now. She has them, right in the back of mind. She may change a word or two, but she knows what questions work for her. For me, I tend to use shorter questions. I joke because I have a simpler mind, but the point is if I do sense any resistance, and I do, if I was like a 5-year-old, it would be darn annoying to just say, why or what else. That would be annoying. As soon as I sense that, what I do is I step back, and I also learned this, of course, this emotional intelligence thing. And I'll turn it around and make a comment about me. I said, I don't feel like I'm getting it yet. I just want to understand this a little more. And that disarms. So Jorge, that's, if you get that resistance, that's what works for me. If I realize, wow, I am asking stupid questions, I'll step back and explain why, from an emotional point of view, for me, why I'm doing that. Like, I feel like we just might be missing it. I don't think we get to the real issue yet. And that takes the pressure off of them momentarily, so you can move forward.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you.
So,
and Tony, I think that you've mentioned it a couple of times, so I want to make sure that we have some clarity around it. Clear questions are easier for the client to process.
Yeah. Because
they're shifting, they're changing, they're working, they're thinking, they're resolving. So, in some of our classes, we work on 3-word questions ask that question in 3 words. So, initially all of us, when we first started, our questions sometimes are really long that we could get lost in the question.
Mhm.
Right? So,
And don't stack the question.
and don't stack the question. So short is, when you're saying short, I'm hearing clear,
Mhm.
right? But I just want our audience to know that there isn't a length that's right or wrong. It's just asking the question clearly so that it's easily understood by the receiver. Would that be fair to say, Tony?
Yes, absolutely.
Because in all your brilliance, you always have information to share, right? That was something that you were working on, right? So now you've totally asked questions a different way now, and I've seen, how proud I am of you, and you're getting a different response and reaction from everyone. So thank you for your input. Something popped off. Robin asked a question, and my mouse is giving me a little difficulty. Did someone answer that? Yeah.
Yeah, she
Okay,
wanted to know the rest
Yeah.
of what you said about the 60,000.
Yeah,
thoughts a
we
day,
have
80%
we have
negative.
we have 60. The top part is correct. We think at 1,000 words per minute, but we only hear at 200 to 250. So we're really only using 0.25% of our ability. And if you come back and join us another time, I'll tell you what you're doing with the other 75%, because as coaches, we know what you're doing with the other 75%, because we're working on that too while we have you in the 25%. But the other numbers were, we have approximately 60,000 thoughts a day. 90% of those thoughts are repetitive thoughts every day, and 80% of those repetitive thoughts are negative. So, Robin, I just want to make sure that.
And that's not just for all the neurotic people.
No, that's data that's out there.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
can I add one quick thing? I don't know.
Absolutely. Yes or no question.
I'm sorry.
No. Yes.
How do you feel if I ask another question?
I feel great about it.
Okay. So we've talked
See
a lot about.
See how quick she self-corrected? That's,
Yeah.
Did you, John, you weren't in class with Candice, but on a split second, she caught herself,
I was
right?
impressed.
Yeah.
Very impressive. One semester.
One semester.
Very impressive.
So I just want to share, because a lot of the questions and things we've been talking about are sometimes in a sphere of growth and change, and it has a connotation of maybe negative or wrong. However, there's so much built into the coaching practice when you think about asking people on positive growth improvement opportunities. And so what would you do if you could make no mistakes? That's a totally different question. Sets them up to forward think, and we're with them on the path moving forward. What would it look like if you knew you could whatever? And just listen to them, take all those notes. Now you have all kinds of questions to move them in the positive upwards direction. And they're realizing maybe that, they lack focus. They're scattered because they have all kinds of ideas. We're going to help people focus and move forward one step at a time.
Yeah, we're not just randomly asking questions. We're asking empowering, solutions-focused, forwarding questions. Mm-hmm. Any other adjectives we want to add in there? John, hit it.
Well, no, I love the example Candice gave, and that's a very empowering. It's very empowering for them to help them coalesce the ideas and refine them and that sort of thing. And then, but you can use the same question. What would that look like? Literally as a challenge. When somebody's saying, well, I just want our product to be perfect. And I say, what does that look? So what does perfect look like? Because perfect is such a big tease. And so when you get them to really focus on that and try to create the perfect picture of it, they start to realize that that's not the number one goal they should go for. And
perfect has a different definition to each client.
Yes.
So we need to understand what perfect means for them. That's perfect right. May be, I hit $100,000 in sales. Perfect to someone else, it may be, I just run on the treadmill for 15 minutes. You know, what does that mean? So we are just on the hour. I want to thank all of you for joining us. Tony Novak, John Griffith, Candice Racite, all amazing, wonderful business people within your industries, as well as professional coaches. If anyone would like to reach out to any of our panelists, please feel free to email us. Sue, do we have, do our attendees know how to get in touch with us, correct?
I am going to send out an email probably this afternoon, and I can include all of that.
Great, great. And next month, when we have this format, we invite you all to come back, both our guests as well as our panelists. And when we do more of a meeting format, we can put all of our information in the chat, and then everyone can share with everyone else. So thank all of you. Anyone have any last words?
Great being with you guys.
Yeah, thank you very
And I look forward to the new format sometime when we can actually see the participants.
See our
and
guests,
interact with them.
yeah.
That'll be great.
We're all touchy-feely coaches, right? We need to do everything that's going on.
Didn't get into this business to do it in a closet.
Yeah. Okay, thank you, everyone. And with that, Susan is going to wrap us up. We hope to see you next month, the second Friday of the month for Coach's Corner.